Hey everyone, welcome back to I Will Go Down with the Ship. I'm Heather.
And I'm Chelsea. How's everybody doing today?
We're doing good, Chelsea. We're doing good, especially after episode 3. But before we get into that, we are writers after all, so we should probably talk about our writing. So let's do just a quick writing check-in. What are you writing? How is it going? And what's your plan for the week?
Okay, so I'll start. I am working on episodes for Deceit and Desire, which is my cowboy romantic suspense, my spicy cowboy romantic suspense for my Lauren Wheeler pen name, and posting it on Kindle Vella. I wrote 2 episodes this morning. The plan was to write one, but I was feeling the vibe, so I decided to roll with it.
Oh, and really quick, I want to touch base with people because some people do that. If you are in the zone, the best option for you is if you have the ability, keep going. Because if you cut yourself off, you are teaching your creativity, which is a muscle, a new habit. So if you want to get in the zone, if you want to get in the flow, a lot of people say, don't worry about word count. Don't worry about sprints. Don't worry about doing anything. If you're feeling it, let yourself go. Because clearly for Chelsea, it worked out really well.
It
So yeah,
did. I
yeah,
finished an entire chapter, which, like, for me, with Deceit and Desire, each chapter of the book is like 4 Vela episodes. And I had no intention of writing multiple episodes this morning, but it was just happening for me. And I also had no intention of making myself ugly cry this morning, but that happened too.
well, that's always the
But I
best
think it
thing,
worked out
I
really
think.
well.
Yeah, I
It
think
was
ugly
very
cry.
cathartic.
Yeah. And I feel like if you are feeling what your heroine is feeling, like if you are experiencing that, then that is a very good indicator that you are doing your job the way that you
Right.
need to be doing.
Like,
So,
if you're feeling it, I feel like that will translate to your readers, but if you're disconnected, I feel like that will also translate to your readers.
for
So,
sure.
as much as you can when you're writing, try to connect with those emotions and get in that space, even and especially when those emotions are hard emotions.
Yep. Um,
Now, what
yeah.
about you? What are you working on?
I'm working on book 7 in my dark hockey romance, and it's funny because I feel like the themes are on par with the series in terms of darkness, but in terms of like steaminess, nothing. I'm already at the halfway point and they have not even kissed. But I feel like this story is such a character develop, like a character driven story that it will happen. I mean, you've been helping me with the story since the
Oh, yeah.
beginning. Um, and so, but like it I honestly don't know how readers who are used to books 1 through 6, like literally book 6 is just he's obsessed and there's sex on almost every other chapter, and this one is a completely different ball game. But I feel like if they like the dark themes, and then if they like those broken alpha and that like very innocent, naive kind of genuine optimistic heroines, then I think that they'll like it. Um, so yeah,
I have
so the
read excerpts, y'all, and let me just tell you, it is a whole vibe, and I love it. It
it's
is fantastic.
it's fun. It's fun. And it's just I you guys have to get yourself a partner because it's makes the writing process so much easier. Even if you know, even if you trust yourself, just being able to bounce ideas off of someone who isn't your, spouse, who is going to look at you when you're trying to explain, no, 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 the boyfriend is going to watch them have sex because he doesn't want to deal with virgins, and Chelsea's not going to judge you. She's going to
No.
understand this is the game and not look at you like, how how authentic is this to real life? And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay.
That's the thing that I was actually thinking about earlier today and wanted to talk about, like, in our writing and especially our darker stuff, is like we as grown ass women have moved beyond the need for the whole moral of the story thing.
Hmm.
And we are living in an era now with our writing, and I think with the things that we want to read and the ships that we want to consume, where we know what fantasies we want to consume, and we don't need a moral of the story to go with it.
Yep.
We realize that it's fiction and we want to consume what we want to consume, and we realize that it's fiction. So it is safe for us to consume these things that are dark because it's fiction,
Right.
and we don't need that moral of the story thing. Like, we don't need the black cat from that one version of Little Red Riding Hood that's like sitting on a shelf and waiting until after we have eaten our grandmother's flesh to tell us what just happened and then call us a slut.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need that. We're past that point in our lives.
And I
And it's
think,
what
yeah,
we
go ahead.
consume.
No, and I think to go off of what you said, um, I think that having that or making that choice, like to go off with the Red Riding Hood thing, let us have sex with the big bad wolf. Like, let us
Right?
choose to do that and not fall into it. Like, and this is so important in your own writing, is make your characters like choose to do things, whether it's the right choice or the wrong choice. Don't have life happen to them where they're in these circumstances beyond their control. We don't want victims as um as our characters. They might become victims, whether they are assaulted, jumped, they're fighting, whatever, but they don't have to act like they're victims.
Right.
They
They don't have to live in the victim mentality.
exactly. And I think that we are allowed to, the reason we love books, whether we're reading them or writing them, is we want to explore these fantasies that is safe for us to explore. And this is why we love some of the shows that we love. And this is why we get so angry when we have those morals shoved down our throats of like, like, oh, here's Daemon Targaryen. You shouldn't love him, even though we've made him this character. Now I'm going to ruin his character so you don't love him because you were never supposed to love him in the first place. Like, don't do that crap. Like, lean into your character. Don't censor yourself just because you're worried that, oh, it's not politically correct or it's not what it's supposed to be. If you love age gap, if you love professor student, like all of that, for those forbidden tropes, like go for it. Like, you will find an audience, trust me. Like,
Right? Your
we are
audience
out
is
there.
absolutely out there.
Yep.
Like, Gulsey shippers, we are out here. We are
Yeah.
absolutely out here, and we are all for this. But going back to what you were saying about let your characters make these choices, just give them agency.
Yeah.
That's really, give them agency, and also give us as your consumers
Hmm.
agency and the ability to make the choices that we want to make without shoving moralisms down our throats on the regular. Like, we have moved past the childhood fairy tales of this is the moral of this story, this is what you need to learn from this. We want to consume what we want to consume
Hmm.
without having things crammed down our throats at this
Right.
point.
Right. And I know that we've touched on this like every single episode, but I think that it bears repeating multiple times over because we keep seeing it, especially in popular culture. And, I feel like in the indie space, there's so many different options for you, regardless of what you like to read, whatever your kinks are, you will find something. And usually you'll find multiples of something. Where the reason why we get so stubborn about this is because you aren't going to find it in shows or movies right now. Like, you're only going to find certain things. And I think this is one of the reasons why we were so passionate to start this podcast, is because we really want to take something that as of right now is so good on its base. Like, every single episode, you know, is so good. And even like, if you want to kind of get into it, when they kind of touch on communism versus capitalism, right now, at least, that's kind of a background. That's part of the world building, and it raises interesting questions without necessarily picking a side. And again, this is as of right now. And I think that, as long as the show doesn't become one way or the other, I think that if the focus is on the characters and making it make sense for the characters and how the plot needs to respond to the characters, then I'm good with it. And I want to show this example as this is great writing. This is what we want to see more of, especially within popular culture, because in the indie community, you can find it. Like, you will find good books, you will find good series, you will find this. And, you know, if you're trying to become an author and you're trying to go indie, this is a really good example of how to build this world, how to build these characters, even to a degree, your romantic relationships. And I just think that, and obviously Chelsea and I, in further seasons of this podcast, will touch on shows that aren't hitting the mark or that have made mistakes, and we will go into why. But I think that Fallout was the perfect show to start with, just because this first season was so solid.
It was. It has really been an incredible show so far, and I've been incredibly duly impressed. But a thing that I want to say about Bethesda games in general, like the Fallout games, Skyrim, like most of the Elder Scrolls, stuff like that, is that they do not push one agenda over the other or one faction over the other, and that is something that I love about them. Like, you can join the Brotherhood, or you can like be a raider, or you can, like join a band of ghouls, or you can be a Minuteman or whatever, and like they don't cram any one thing down your throat. Like, you can explore all of that stuff on your own. And one of the reasons that I have very high hopes that we may actually get a romance between Lucy and the ghoul is because in the Fallout games, you have the capability over and over again to romance your ghoul companion in the game. And
I've
I'm
heard
just
that.
like,
Yep.
please,
Right.
please.
So it's not unheard of, and relationships like that are canonical to the Fallout world. And as far as interviews have said, this is canon in this Fallout. Like, this is a part of the world. It's not necessarily related to the games, but it still is canon within the world, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So how about if we want to touch on what's one success that you had for your writing this week, and what's one little bit of a hurdle that you had, Chelsea?
Okay, so the success was writing 2 episodes today instead of just 1, and actually hitting flow state. And as far as hurdles, like, I've been really struggling to get to that flow state recently. Like, I just have like, we have a cruise coming up, and I struggle so hard with time management in general. And I've got like so many different things on my plate right now that I've just kind of been like having to get little snatches of time and do my little 600-word episodes and just like let that be that. But this morning, since I was in the flow already, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to like get this and really get these words down and finish this chapter. And it felt really good to do that.
Yeah, for sure. For me too, I feel like one of the struggles that I've had with this writing is just, I really, really, because the story means so much to me, I really want to make sure I'm hitting these beats. And so it's just kind of slowing down and really taking the time to make sure the structure makes sense, that there's a cause and an effect, that there is a chapter and then almost like a reaction, like a sequel chapter to it. I want to make sure that they're feeling the emotions, that it's believable. And so it's not so much a struggle, it's just I'm really slowing down the writing process for myself in order to give it that time and attention. And so I also consider that a win, because normally I'm very like fast when it comes to my drafting. Like, I really like hitting it hard. But I've noticed slowing down and really getting to know your characters it really helps you touch base with who they are on a deeper level rather than those surface tropes that are so easy to slip into, especially if you are trying to finish super fast, trying to rapid release, trying to do all of these things. And I know that it's really helped me understand who my characters are a little bit more, just to take that time and, talk to you about it, or just sort of like think things through. And that's really helped me. So,
Right. And as a developmental editor, one thing I will say is a thing that I love to see from my writers and like from you as my writing buddy is those setups and payoffs. And that's a thing that I have really loved seeing on my second watch through of Fallout
yeah.
is the setups and payoffs that they've given us because they're genuinely incredible.
Well, and it's funny, and we'll go into this in a couple of minutes when we start talking about the show, but it's like on that second watch through that you wouldn't necessarily like. For me, it's like you're taking in so much at one time, and when you go through it again, you're going to pick up things that you didn't notice before, or you did notice but didn't understand, and now you come back with that understanding. And I just think it's honestly like so good. So why don't we jump into the third episode called The Head. And Chelsea, go ahead. Why don't you let's talk about it.
All right, I love it. With the beginning, I love how this episode opens with Cooper Howard filming one of his westerns, and
Yep.
we think at first blush that we're seeing that same swagger he has now as the ghoul, but they turn the moment on its head
Yep.
with that really beautiful "do I really have to kill him" moment, and I love that so hard. It tickles me because here we're getting a glimpse of the Cooper Howard Lucy grew up idolizing,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps more importantly, we're seeing the beginning of his destruction, the beginning of the downward spiral that ultimately leads to the ghoul that we know and love. And in that moment, it's almost like past Cooper is defending future Lucy's ideals.
Yeah.
He's arguing with Emil, and it's adorable.
Oh
And it
yeah.
really underscores all the ways that Barb wrecks him
Yeah.
and like leads him to becoming what he is now. And I love the back and forth with Emil and arguing about the script and the new direction, and Cadillac Bob, who got fired for being a communist but wrote the best scripts in Cooper's opinion,
Yep.
where his character was very clearly a squeaky clean good guy who behaved very much like Lucy does. And I just love that parallel that they set up for us.
Oh yeah. I mean, and so yeah, that's exactly what I have. And it's interesting because again, it's that setup of when Emil says they don't want to see that squeaky clean guy anymore. They want to see that someone like you who is so squeaky clean, even someone like you can be pushed to extremes, driven to these extremes. And Cooper Howard responds, well, yeah, but that's not really what I do. And I feel like right there is such a poignant moment because obviously it is. He is pushed to extremes, he changes. And now, when we see him interact with Lucy, starting with this episode on, he is now going to be trying to push her. And even Walton Goggins has admitted in an interview that I just saw today that actually when he first sees Lucy, he recognizes something in her. And and he even is like, I'm going to push her a little bit because he recognizes her intelligence and he wants to see how much he can get away with. And so just having that sort of like we saw pre-ghoul and now we see the ghoul and we don't necessarily see what spurred him to become it. We can make inferences. It's like it's very that is really good in terms of writing and setup, just character development, because the Cooper Howard we know as the ghoul, like he is that guy. He is the guy who was pushed to the extremes. And he thinks of himself as this naive guy who's like, oh, I would never do something like that. And it's interesting because if we go back to I think it was episode 2 where Wilsick tells Lucy something about who are you going to be when you become a different animal altogether, or it's like,
Right.
yeah,
Are you still going to want the same
same
things
things. Yeah.
to become a different animal altogether? And I loved that line. Like that
Yep.
was fantastic.
Yeah. And that is
And
another way to foreshadow is through these little pieces of dialogue. And so, yeah,
that's really genius writing.
yeah.
And then I love after that moment with Emil, the lavender taffy. I don't know why this sticks out to me so hard, but like that moment, I love the thing with the lavender taffy. Like, are you ready for me to go off on this tangent?
No, go for it. I know you've been waiting.
Okay. So, like, I really feel like the lavender taffy is the writer's first warning to us about Barb. And it also brought to mind at the entry in the illustrated herbiary by Maya Toll on lavender. Like, it stuck out to me in my head. I'm really big on symbolism in my own writing
Yes.
and things like that. And I went and looked up this morning the entry on lavender in the illustrated herbiary. And lavender is traditionally like in the illustrated herbiary represents tough love, and there were several things in there that really stood out to me, like that people think of lavender as soft and like useful for shaping quiet space, and that's a direct quote, and that made me immediately think of the vaults. Like, that's a
Mm-hmm.
parallel that I drew. And like calming rowdy children, which makes me think of like Barb and the masses and like taking their money and like, purchase your
Mm-hmm.
space in the vaults and stuff like that. And but behind all that is a bite, and that bitterness that's on the back end of lavender. And like it seems all soft and sweet and things like that, but then there's that slap on the backside. And I there was another line directly in the illustrated herbiary. She handles emergencies with military precision, and I was like, and she'd make a fine spy, and that's 1,000% Barb in my head. And that they chose to make the taffy lavender, I'm just like, that's like, that has to be a meaningful and, um, conscious choice
Yeah.
on their part, and it makes me love the "That's the worst thing I've ever put in my mouth"
Yeah.
line a billion times more, because it's the first real hint we get at their essential incompatibility,
Yes.
besides, like, we saw in the opening episode that they're divorced, he's paying alimony or whatever, but, like, this is the first direct look that we get and the first hint at the falling apart. And this is like the first crack in their foundation. But just like side note, despite the fact that Barb is a villain, I do love that it is patently clear in this episode that she and Cooper both adore Janie
Oh,
with
yeah.
with everything in their bodies. And because I lack time management skills, that's all my notes. So now we are going off of your
Okay.
notes.
Well, no, and I think to go to that scene of Barb and Cooper, I think this is our first introduction of Barb. And I really like it because it shows that Cooper Howard is kind of a romantic.
Yes,
So, like, we can see he adores her. And I don't know if it's just okay, I already have my ship, so maybe like I have my ship goggles on or something. But it's like I felt like you see the clear adoration that he has for her, and I do not see it as reciprocated. Just even in the little bit of the looks that she gives him, like she flirts back, but there's a power dynamic, and I feel like it's clear that she's kind of the one wearing the pants, right? Like,
right.
and I'm not saying good thing, bad thing, if it works for your relationship, whatever, but
Mhm.
this is not the same ghoul that we see in present day. Like, and I feel like this all sort of plays into it.
Yes.
And I
And there's
think that
almost
it's
like a condescending tone from her toward him,
yes,
like a pat on the head, sure, sweetheart,
right.
type vibe. And like I prefer present day Cooper. Like, I love past Cooper and like how sweet he was and just how much he adored Barb, but like he deserved better. My boy deserved better.
And I think that so what's interesting is if you watch it and she says something like, oh, it's like the first time you've been touched by someone and they I don't remember what it was, but like he winds up touching her face or he kisses her or something about like oh, I think she hands him the taffy and there's a zoom in on his fingers. And I was just like, well, this is interesting now that I know what's going to happen to fingers in a couple of episodes. But I just thought that that was really interesting because it's like it goes back to like Pride and Prejudice with Keira
The
Knightley
hand
and how
touch.
like the hand touch and how even the director at the time was like, we did that on purpose because touching people back in the day was like you did not do that. That so for him to touch her spoke so much. And so when you are randomly zooming in on body parts like that aren't the face or the eyes or whatever, to me, like that's significant. And so for them to sort of like zoom in on Cooper's fingers when he's touching her or taking the taffy or whatever it was, like I didn't catch it until that second rewatch, and now I understand the significance of it. Um, but I also think that, you have this sort of setup of, okay, Barb's kind of flirting with him in order to get him to do something too, in a
Right.
way,
It's
because
what she wants for
yeah,
Voltec.
right,
Because he's never done an ad before in his life, but he says that line, but then again, my wife's never asked me to.
exactly.
And
And
like,
well, yeah, and so she's kind of flirty, and he kind of plays into that because he's romantic, because he's crazy about her. And so they go off together to do this thing. And I feel like that's very interesting because and we will touch on this a little bit more when we have the Ghoul and Lucy meeting again. But when the ghoul basically has a gun to Lucy's head and she turns to look at him. She's not scared of him. Again, she's not disgusted. She's not any of those things. She actually, it feels like, and I know this is just me being a romance writer, it's like her face softens. She smiles and she's like, she says something like, oh, hey, or
oh,
oh, hi again, or
hello again.
something, hello
Right.
again. And it's like, I wouldn't say she's flirting. She's just sort of like this innocent girl. And Cooper kind of looks at her. He does the head cock thing again. And it's almost like for a fraction of a second, he wants to let himself go back and forth in that same kind of flirtatious way that he and Barb had. But it's almost like he had to kill it. So he smacks her with the gun and it's
Right.
like, no, I'm not letting myself get into
Go
that.
there.
Yeah, I'm not going to forget what my purpose is, what I'm doing, what my goal is, just because some pretty girl smiled at me. I'm not going
Right.
to do that again.
And well, I'm not going to forget what happened to me last time.
I did it.
I
Exactly.
allowed someone to, like, the last time I allowed someone to manipulate me because I cared.
Right.
And like, he's not playing that game anymore. And like, he pistol whips the shit out of her.
Yep.
And like, but
And
I'm
that's the
still here
thing.
for this ship though.
Well, and okay, number one, we're dark romance writers, so we get it. Number two, it's like, again, this goes back to setting up a character and understanding the motives. And so sometimes it takes a couple of rewatches, especially since we don't have the words on the paper. So we can't make assumptions based on a text. Whereas as writers, it's a little bit easier to show motivation with our words than just showing, because we're not in Cooper's head. We're not even in Lucy's head. We're just kind of watching what's being given to us. But knowing what we know, and I think what you said earlier about things being so conscious, like they made this conscious decision. We see this whole meet with Barb before we see Cooper and Lucy interact again. And I think that that is really important because we see what Barb has. What Cooper and Barb have, I should say. And like you said, even Janie's there, and we see like it's a very cute family dynamic. But I just feel like Barb is not warm necessarily. I know that she cares. I believe that she cares. But the actress who plays her is so good because it's like there's that little bit of frostiness where you're just kind of like, what's going on with her. And I think that this, again, to almost like Max's character, where it's like you want to kind of root for this because you see how happy Cooper is and you see how they have a great, like a beautiful daughter, and that this Hollywood actor is just crazy for his wife, who is not a model, who is, I mean, she's beautiful, but like she's not in the Hollywood game, and he's completely smitten, loyal. And so you're just like, yes, I want to see more of this. But there's just something about Barb that feels off, and you're not quite sure what it is. And I feel like that is such brilliant acting because I'm just like, okay, do I want to? I mean, I know. Okay, if I'm shipping, obviously, I want this marriage to end in the worst possible way. I want to hate Barb. I
Right?
want Cooper to hate Barb. But like, if I'm trying to be like completely like, okay, I'm gonna, give it a chance or whatever. I'm kind of like, am I rooting for Barb right now? Like, what is going on? And I just, it was hard for me to put my finger on it. Even like with that foreshadowing of the alimony, I was just like, but she seems like she hasn't done anything wrong right now.
There's
So,
something she does with her eyes.
oh, we'll talk about that.
It's
I have notes for that.
she's so like it's just like this super intelligent but cold and calculating
Hmm.
look
Yeah.
that she does that is absolutely brilliant. And like she plays masking well. Like she has this very pleasant mask,
Yeah.
but she keeps that calculating look in the eyes, and I think that is played absolutely brilliantly.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's really quick. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I really want to touch base on Max really quick because I don't think we talked about I think it was the first episode when we first meet Max. We see that he's essentially getting bullied by the other um brotherhood. And again, this goes into we are sympathetic for him at this point. We don't really know who he is. We see that he is getting bullied. He doesn't deserve to be bullied. And so again, it's that okay, we're rooting for him. And we see that one of the people kind of leading the charge is this blonde guy named Thaddeus, who otherwise I mean, you look at him and he's kind of has this like he's kind of a nerd, you know what I mean? In the
Yes,
best way. Like
absolutely.
you can tell, like, you're just kind of like, this guy is bullying this guy, like, what's going on here? And,
I loved how they explained it in this episode. Like
oh,
that was
yeah.
brilliant.
So, but I think that it's just to go back to like so we see Max and we see him after the fact, and I just honestly like I love this world building that they do where you can literally sell your teeth for caps and just things like
Right?
that. And so like if you're building your world, like one of the things is obviously you don't want to info dump. We don't need to know every single thing about your world. What we do need to know about the world is how it's going to affect your character. Everything that you do, whether it's plot or world building, it needs to be based on your characters. And so I love that we kind of hear a little bit of like, we get the hint in the first couple of episodes about the teeth, but then Max actually goes in to sell teeth because he's trying to get this part
Part
fixed.
for the suit. Yeah.
Yep. And I just loved it. I thought that it was so funny because she's just like, he's like, can you fix this? And I'll give you extra if you do it fast. And it takes her like all of 1/2 of a second to fix it.
Right. I
And
thought that was fantastic.
yeah. And so so anyway, so what's really fascinating is so he fixes the suit and then he gets a call from the Brotherhood basically saying, hey, you missed your check-in. And I just feel again, it's that ability to lie where I mean he's shit at it, but
Right. Like I love how hard he goofs, but it does come so easily to
it's
him.
come so easily to him. And then when he realizes he's getting a squire, he's like, oh shit, what am I gonna do about this?
Right.
And
And
so
I love the irony that it is Thaddeus. Like that was
oh
such
yeah,
a brilliant writing choice. Like
I
I
love
love
Thaddeus.
every bit
I'm
of
not
that.
gonna lie, he is
I like
so
him too.
hilarious.
He
He's
is
so
very
hilarious
funny.
to me. And it's so weird because it's like I saw him beating the shit out of Max, but then it's like I don't know how to explain it. And this is what's so good about the writing and the acting. And it's like it's like you want to root for all of these even the chicken fucker. You want to root for this
Right.
guy. Like,
Right.
come
And
on.
like why?
Yeah.
Why?
Why do I want to do that? I don't know. Oh my gosh. But yeah, and so we have the squire and he like he it's just what's scary to me when it came to Max is just how easy it was for him to take on the role of being not only a knight, but Knight Titus specifically. Like,
Right. And being a douchebag like Knight Titus.
well, okay, so we should go back because before Thaddeus even comes, Max deals with a group of guys who are going after his
Trying to steal
armor.
the suit. Yeah.
Yes, and
And like
so,
my villain crack theory again, because he uses the suit to crush that one guy's skull and
oh
like
yeah.
does not even bat an eyelash.
Well,
And
okay, so
like,
when
yeah,
he's
they're
doing
trying
it,
to take his shit.
right.
But like, damn though.
Okay, so like it was interesting because, he comes back with his I loved how he's lisping because his tooth got pulled and
Yeah,
he's
because
like,
he was
step
numbed and
away from the suit or whatever.
that was so funny. I died.
Well, and this humor is something that happens throughout the series and it's so brilliant. And so yeah, so he confronts the people and he gets the shit kicked out of him again. But I love this for Max because again, it's that I want to root for him because he picks himself back up, he gets some tools and
Right.
he's like, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to fight for what I feel like I have earned. And
I
so,
love that one of them is a toilet seat. Like
oh
that
yeah,
just brought me so much joy.
and so he tries, and again, he gets the shit kicked out of him. But this time, he's pressed against the suit, and you can see him when the crazy thing is, the guy who has him pinned isn't the guy he splats the head of. That guy's just
Right.
watching, kind of egging everybody else on. And
Right.
so he puts the hand, and Max genuinely looks surprised that this happened, that it was like he didn't
That it
realize what
worked.
he was doing, that it worked. But the guy runs off and he is just kind of like, again, it's that now power is going to his head. Now look what I can do. Because when Thaddeus comes and he kneels down, he's like, I'm your squire. Max automatically puts his hand out like he's going to do the same thing to Thaddeus.
Right.
And Thaddeus is like, I'm sorry, what have I done to offend you? Please tell me so I can make amends. And that is how your crack theory is starting to really like take shape, because you would think that out of anyone who understands what it's like to be a squire and what it's like to be treated like shit, it's Max. Now, granted, I get that Thaddeus was his
Bullied
bully.
him.
Like, I
Right.
get that. But to go to that extreme when you have this power already, it's not like it's Max is stripped of the suit. Because if it was that, then I would be fine if Max wanted to beat him up or something, like to get that sort of revenge. But he has way more power. He just crushed a guy's skull in, and he's thinking about doing it too. The fact that he even has to think about it, and granted, I guess you could say, people might say, well, if Thaddeus found out who Max really is, that could be dangerous and he could potentially be protecting himself. But again, that doesn't make it right. Like, if we're talking about
Right.
morality, which this whole episode is about morals, that does not make it right, in my opinion. Um, so yeah, so I just thought that
Right. And the smile, first of all,
oh
when
yeah.
Max sees Thaddeus groveling
Yep.
like that, and the grin he gets,
And again,
villain,
it's brilliant
villain.
acting because it's not like, oh, this is hilarious to me, haha. It's more like, that's
It's a
right,
power high.
bitch. Yeah, like it's like, look at what position you're in now. Like, yeah, that's the thing that's
Oh, how the
scary.
tables have turned.
Yeah,
And like, first of all, I understand that. Like,
right,
I get you, I see you,
right.
Maximus, and like, no judgment, sir. But that smile was 1,000% villain
Oh
all
yeah.
day long. Like sexy, though, I will give him that, but villain.
Well, and that's again, that where the writers and the acting are putting us in these positions of, I want to root for you, but then you make a choice. And now I'm just like, do I want to? It's not even a hard no, I don't. I mean, granted, as a shipper, I definitely don't. But if I'm just doing this from a writer perspective and we're talking about characters, I don't know. And this is what's so brilliant about the show, is that everyone is coded in gray, except possibly Lucy, but we see that she gets a little bit dirty as the show progresses, you know what I mean?
Right.
And and yeah, and so can I just give a shout out to all of the Vaulties during this episode? Like, oh my
Norm.
God,
Norm is my bae in this episode. I
I
love
love
him.
I love
Like,
all of them. Like, oh my gosh, the guy who's like, I'll teach them Shakespeare. I was like, yes, sir. Yes, you will. I know you will.
like they're so precious, but like I so hardcore identify with Norm because I'm sitting here like eye for an eye, bitch.
Yeah.
Like
Well, and
that's where I'm
the
coming
best
from.
part where he's like, Shet's literally like having a meltdown because he can't like be the gatekeeper anymore. And Norm's just like, yeah, what are you gonna do? I hate all of my jobs equally. So how are you gonna punish me? And it's
Like
just so funny.
I love you can see the little shit having fun
Oh
with
yeah.
Betty though about the like I hate all my jobs equally. How are
So
you gonna
yeah, what
punish
are
me?
you gonna do?
Like,
Quite
what
a
are you gonna do?
conundrum.
What are you
Yeah.
gonna do? Like, I loved that. That was so well played and so damn funny to me. Like, I thought it was hilarious
Oh yeah.
that like he's screwing with them. Like he's so smart
Right.
and he's just screwing with them. And I love Norm as a
I do
character and
too.
I adored him in this episode. I thought he was fantastic. And like hopping back to Maximus for a second though, um I love how we see both the ghoul and Max and Thaddeus approach oh my goodness, the body that the head was attached to, and I
We'll
can't
say
remember his name
we'll
today.
say.
Wilzig.
Yes.
Wilzig. Both approach, well, all three approach Wilzig's body, and I love how the ghoul just like instantaneously, like you can see as he's looking at it, he knows, like, oh, Vaulty cut his head off.
Yeah.
Okay. Like he doesn't say it out loud or anything, but you can see it
Yeah.
happening in his head. That he just acknowledges it and he moves on and he's like, okay, let's go find that head.
Yeah.
And I love how Maximus and Thaddeus both just immediately assume that the ghoul did it, and it like never crosses their mind
Well, and
that
again, I
he could
think
have
that
done that.
this is going to set up your Gaston arc too, because again, based on, and I was really paying attention, and I think it's really good to go back and watch, and I especially like when, you know, even the scenes with Norm and Betty, I'm like, okay, Betty, now that I know who you really are, bitch, like I'm trying to watch you. And it was like,
Right?
okay, she didn't reveal her hand. Like I was like, okay, I she hasn't seen one way or the other, except that, oh, she called Vault 31 and luckily, you know, nothing happened to them. But to your point, the
Her
fact,
poker face is so genius,
oh
though.
my
Like
gosh, yeah. Well, it,
brilliant.
and so like to I love, like you said, like that Cooper would assume that Balti would do anything, especially like, you know, in order to like, I don't think he completely understands her motivations, but he does see that she's willing to get her hands dirty. Whereas Max writes her off as a damsel in distress. And I
Right?
loved the dialogue about the ghouls because again, you have Thaddeus saying the Brotherhood's trying to, I think, I eviscerate them from existence or just something
Right?
like that where they hate ghouls. And so
And I
when,
love the irony that he ends up becoming one. Like
oh
that is
yeah,
so
oh
beautiful to
yeah,
me. Like that is brilliant, brilliant fucking writing. And like they're setting that up this early
oh
in the
yeah.
series is so genius to me.
Well, and I think that that is just again, it's telling that Max only sees Lucy on that surface level of the big doe eyes. She's innocent. She's something pure that needs protection. She can't go out and fight because she's incapable of doing something. That's why she needs a big, strong man like me to protect her. Whereas,
Right. He's infantilizing her like a lot
exactly.
of people want to do.
Yeah. And
But that
whereas
moment with the fawn at the scene with the gulpers was really a genius like
well,
moment.
I called it Persephone too. Like to go to your theory
Yes.
about Persephone because hang on, I do have I actually put notes on this scene. Gosh. Da, 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 da. Okay. So it's like she's she feeds it. She literally gives this deer something to eat and the deer comes to her trusting her. And it's like she responds favorably to Lucy. So we see that Lucy is almost like she's not marred by all of the ugliness of this world. She looks at the deer not as food, but as something to cherish, like a life, and she wants to feed it. Um, but then obviously the gulper comes and grabs the deer. And what I really loved about this scene is we see that number one, Lucy again has to realize we're not in Kansas anymore, right? We're not in the vaults. This is the shit's happening. But she doesn't drop to her knees and start crying. She doesn't like do anything to save the deer. Like not in a mean way, but like she's being smart. She's acting
Right.
like she is not going to sit and feel sorry for her. She's not going to be a victim, which we kind of talked about at the beginning of this episode. She does shit. Like, so it comes for her and she isn't freaking out. She's like, okay, give me my trank gun, let me shoot it. Like, she is, it
She's
doesn't always
trying to
work.
pivot and
Yeah,
thinking on her feet. And no, it doesn't always work, but at least she is active and she's
right.
actively doing something.
And this again, to show her character development, she cut off the head and now she's in another bit of a situation and she's fighting for that too. And this completely contradicts Max's whole theory of, oh, well, it couldn't possibly have been Lucy to have cut the head off. Um, but I did want to go back to Max and Thaddeus because I think that the whole fact that you said, like Thaddeus is sent as the squire, I think that this really puts Max in a position of I can either be empathetic because I understand what it's like and I'm going to choose to forgive what happened, or I can really use my power to make his life shit the same way that he did to me, get that sort of revenge. And it's not necessarily revenge on and you know what's interesting is that I don't understand why it's different. Like, I don't understand why it's different. I just know that it is. Do you get what I mean? Like, in
Mhm.
terms of like revenge, because I'm like, oh, Cooper's gonna go for revenge for what happened to his family. I'm all for it. He deserves it, blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, why? And I don't know if it's because Cooper is not in a position of power right now. He is not. He's a ghoul. He is living off of the chem, and I just feel like Thaddeus has all, or not Thaddeus, Max has a lot of more power. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so we root for the underdog to get that revenge, but I don't think Max is
exactly.
an underdog in this
Mm.
position.
No. And like Cooper is constantly getting the shit kicked out of him
True.
every which way he turns. Like life turns this man every which way but loose. And that is why I think we root for him.
Hmm.
But Maximus almost keeps like stumbling into these lucky power plays.
Right.
And it feels hollow, and I think that's why we don't necessarily root for him as much because it doesn't feel like he's earned it.
No.
And it just feels like a lack of scaffolding, a lack of support, and, like, if he hasn't earned it, I'm not gonna root for him.
Right. And so when Thaddeus gets back to Max before they set off going after the head, there are new orders that the Brotherhood has sent where kill whoever stands in the way. Now Max knows that Lucy is going after or is with Wilsick right now because that is how
Yeah,
they met. So he understands that based on these new orders, he has to essentially kill Lucy. And obviously, he's not going to argue it or whatever, but it's just something to keep in mind in terms of foreshadowing when he is potentially put in a position of having to kill Lucy. And so, what's very interesting to me, and we'll talk about this earlier or later when we get to the episode, is obviously Max and Lucy pair up, but that's because Max and Thaddeus have split ways. It would have been very interesting to have seen what Max would have done if Thaddeus was still around. Like if he
right.
had to be in a position of, okay, what do we do?
Do
Um,
I side with the Brotherhood or do I side with her?
right. And not only that, because it would be easy, I think, for him to kill Thaddeus, but how do I use this to my advantage? Which is exactly what he did when he went to Vault 4. Um, okay,
And can
so
we just give a nod to Vault 4 real quick?
uh,
Because the experimentation in there is why gulpers exist.
oh yeah, and again, that foreshadowing when you look into the gulper and you see the fingers and it's your first watch through, you're just like, holy shit, like what am I looking at? And then it's like once you get to that episode, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a person. Like so
Right. And then,
so
the setup with this, like the vault of all scientists in Vault 4, and then like all of that. Like that was so beautiful. And we'll get to that in that episode. But like the setups and payoffs and the
yeah,
setup with gulpers in this episode was absolutely beautiful.
yep.
And like that's why this series is so strong. Like they came out swinging
Hmm.
with season 1 of
Yeah.
Fallout.
So now we get to our favorite part of the episode. We see Cooper and Lucy meeting, and so obviously she loses the head. Actually, we should go back really quick. Lucy is brilliant, and so she puts a tracker up Wilsick's nose. And so this is again that setup, that foreshadowing, whatever you want to say. And she's kind of trying to figure out, okay, what's going on with this head? Why is it so special? But she's not going to cut into it anymore. She's just going to trust that the head is going to get her to her dad. And that is all she cares about. So we see her putting that tracker in, and she loses the head after the gulper grabs her, which is very interesting. Um, because I think that that's the perfect way to show the second we saw her put a tracker in, we were like, okay, the head is going to go somewhere. She is going to lose it at some point, or it's going to be taken from her. Um, but then so she gets there's that cock of the gun, and then she looks back and she sees him and she's like, hello again. In that like the cutest way. Oh my gosh, Ella, such a genius. Again, I wish I knew, like, did that come from her? Was that the direction? Like, and Cooper just like looks at her and kind of does that head tilt again. And it's like he wants to so badly like banter the
He
way that he did
wants to
with Barb.
engage, but
Yeah.
he knows right now that he can't. Like, he has got to protect himself because it went so badly last time.
Yeah. And so he smacks her and knocks her down. Um, and so I just think that so then obviously we have Cooper, we see Lucy in the water, Cooper pulling her out, and they talk about torture. And he's like,
So funny.
I'm not torturing you, sweetheart. I'm using you as bait or
You
something
think.
like that. And the thing that's interesting that I found is that technically speaking, a gulper doesn't need anything to be alive. Like he could have, if he genuinely wanted to, just killed Lucy and used her body as bait. But he was purposefully keeping her alive every single time he pulled her up. And you know what the best thing, I actually put a note about this is so okay, when she goes down, you see his hand kind of go for her ass and then grab the rope. I don't know if you've seen it. I'll send you a gif of it, but oh my gosh, it was I noticed it the second viewing time, but it's like he almost hesitates because the rope's up here, but his hand's going down there, and then bam, he grabs the rope. And I'm like, aha, I don't blame you. Like,
Yes.
but
Send me that
and
gift, please.
I will
Yes.
send it to you. But anyway, so yeah, so
Oh,
he's
my shipper heart.
we have to, again, these are our crack theories, but it's for me, it's like, okay, he could have killed her. Like he could have killed her because his plan is just get the head. He doesn't need another body to have to deal with. He already has to deal with so much shit on his own. And so he is choosing to keep her alive. And I do think that he
Right?
likes engaging in this little banter. Like he's like,
And it
back in the
costs
day.
him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And again, it's like that no good deed goes unpunished kind of thing. Um,
Exactly. Which, like, people out there who make edits to songs, the new Ronnie Radke featuring Jelly Roll, All My Life, I don't know if that's the actual title of the song. I need a Cooper Howard edit to that song.
right. I
Please,
wish I was good
people.
at stuff like that. Like I'm not.
Me too. I'm not either, but like I know there are people out there who can do it. your Goolsey shippers, help a girl out. Do a
Yeah.
Cooper Howard edit to that song,
Oh
please,
my
because it is
gosh.
so on point.
Yeah. And this next scene, I think, does a really, really great job of, again, that setup, but that cause and effect. So we have, obviously, Cooper is struggling to get Lucy up. So he has to like leave the rope and go grab something else. But in the process, the gulper knocks Cooper down. So Cooper is flat on his ass over there. And then the gulper turns to Lucy. So Lucy, again, because of the setup in this episode, she's not going to be scared, she's not going to be screaming, she's going to look around for shit to try and defend herself with. And guess what she happens to find?
His saddlebag.
His saddlebag, which has his drugs in it, the drugs that is keeping him alive. So she is doing whatever she can to get the gulper away. And there's that cause and effect. If Cooper was up, she would never have grabbed the saddlebag, because he would have tried to. He's not doing it out of the goodness of his heart necessarily. He needs the head, but he and Lucy have that same goal in the moment, which is to get the head. And so, but because he's knocked down, Lucy has to find some other way to save herself. Again, she's not relying on Cooper to save her. She has to do it herself. And his bag is the only thing that's right there. That breaks all of the chem that he needs in order to stay alive as a ghoul. So once that gulper kind of, goes away, like, Cooper realizes, oh shit. And the best part is he's like, motherfucker, like that is
I
where
love that
that
moment.
line, like you can tell he's mad. And this is, again, Walton is just such a good actor. Is so far we've seen him either completely smitten, a laid back guy pre-war, and even just the cool calculating, I'm going to watch and observe what happens before I act as the ghoul. But in this moment, we see him angry. Like we can tell there's a difference. And he's angry because he needs the chem to stay alive, and he needs to stay alive because he's trying to get to his family. And again, this is really important in terms of reiterating their goals and why your characters are doing what they're doing. It's all back to character motivation. So I think that whole scene is just brilliant. I think that, to me, the chemistry is, oh, chef's kiss. It's on fire.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
um, so I just think that, so they are now forced to, I think Cooper says something like, Lucy's like, where are we going? And Cooper says something like, oh, okay, no, they talk about the golden rule. We need to talk about that scene.
Yes.
So what does she say? She says something like,
I'm
why?
sorry, I should have just let it eat me.
Oh,
That
yeah,
whole
yeah,
too,
yeah.
yeah.
And she's all like, how can you treat people this way? And what does he say? Something like, that's that's how it is here, or something. I forget what he
Right.
says.
I
And
forgot what it
he says, like, he's almost like mad at her for not having that same mentality. Like, why don't you treat people this way or something? And she's like, well, the golden rule, like, obviously. And he's like,
unto others as you would have done unto you.
right.
Yeah.
And he has his own golden rule for the wasteland,
The
which
golden
is
rule of the wasteland. Thou shalt get sidetracked by bullshit
shit
every
every
time.
time.
That is the best line in this entire first season, I swear to God.
I
Because, like, as a person who has played the games, the side quests, so on point.
Well, and now we don't have to say, oh, I'm on a side quest. It was like, nope, got sidetracked by bullshit. So I think that's awesome. Um, and so, yeah, so then we see Max and Thaddeus have come upon the Gulper now as well. And again, I like that he gets his ass kicked. In terms of just, even with the armor, that's not going to
Right.
necessarily mean he's a badass if he doesn't know how to use it, or.
Yeah, he's in over his head for sure.
But he thinks that he's not. And I think that, again, this is that contention of, this is one of the reasons why I can't completely root for him, because his pride is blinding him to his
His shortcomings.
responsibility. Yeah, exactly. And I do like that he gets his ass kicked. And I feel like this mirrors Lucy a lot. And I do think that there's a lot of mirroring between Lucy and Max, but in a very interesting way, because Max is constantly, I almost want to say, adapting to every single scenario, but in the most selfish of ways. Like, how can I make this work for me or save my ass? And I get that that is the mentality that you have to have in the wasteland. Whereas Lucy, she's getting her ass kicked too, and but she is doing it for a reason. She's not, she needs to survive in order to get to her dad, just like Cooper needs to survive to get to her, to get to his family. Whereas Max wants the glory. Like, he specifically uses, I think, the word glory in this episode of just that is why he wants to survive. He wants to get the head, he wants to return so he can get all of that respect. And again, that backstory of him being bullied, it completely makes sense for his character. I believe it, but it's also a perfect villain arc, like that villain origin story. Because
Right.
how can we root for him as a hero where I don't know. And so I think that that was really interesting how he winds up saving Thaddeus, which I really liked. And I was like, okay,
I
again,
loved that.
I want to root for you because you did save Thaddeus, whereas with Titus, you didn't. And I understood why you didn't with Titus. And I'm really glad that you did with Thaddeus. And again, that cause and effect, because Thaddeus winds up saving, uh, he winds up saving Max, or Matt, no. Max saved him. Oh, no. Actually, Thaddeus saved him first, right?
Yep.
Thaddeus shot. Okay, so that's interesting. So if it was the opposite, that would have been a very interesting position to put Max. But Thaddeus saves him because Max is like, okay, I'm the one with the power. Again, in over your head. You stay over there. He gets in over his head, and someone might like Thaddeus saves him. And you would think, okay, this is gonna humble me a little bit. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but
It
I
doesn't
don't know.
seem to.
It doesn't seem to, exactly. And so then Max, that obligation, now I have to save him. And it's just so funny when it like explodes or it throws up all over them. And
Right.
just, I just think that that's so funny. Um, and I just think that it's like, what is the right thing here? Because even Max, when they have that exchange, like Thaddeus afterwards is like, you saved me. Like, he's almost surprised. But what
Right.
does Max say? You saved me
You saved
first.
me first.
And it's
Right.
almost like he has to justify why he did a good thing. And that kind of bothered me. And I was like, okay, no, like, you need to save him because that is the right thing to do.
Right. And that's where he and Lucy play off each other so much,
Yeah.
because it's the Lucy is so unselfish,
Yeah.
essentially in her core,
And we'll
and
see that in the
Maximus
next
is so
episode.
selfish.
Mhm. So I think that let's see.
And like I love the moment when they're like when Lucy and the ghoul are like trekking through the desert together, and they're like at the studio,
Oh yeah, that's
and
the
he's
last part. Yep.
drinking that water, and she's like, "Please, I need water." And she's begging, and he's feeling like a petty bitch because she broke his Kim's, and he just
Yep.
like drinks it a little bit and then just pours the rest
Pours it
out.
on the floor. Oh
Like
my
that was
gosh. That is so funny.
like
And I think again, that is him poking at her. Like,
right,
he was like, because it's so funny because she like, I guess she doesn't realize that he had water. And so when he pulls it out, her eyes get like hopeful and like, sir, I really need some water. Like, and he doesn't even respond. Like, and this is Walton's like talent. Like, you can see everything in that face, in those eyes. Like, we don't need him to say anything. Like, we already know. And I just think that it's a brilliant scene because again, he's being a petty little bitch, but it's so funny. And she's seeing it like in her mind because of how she was raised. She's like, why is he treating me this way? What could I have personally done to offend him? And this is the great thing because at this point in the show, we don't really know why Cooper hates Lucy so much. But what I really, really like about this is I don't know if you remember, but I think I can't remember if it was the first episode. Yes, I think it is because that's when Lucy gets her vault suit on and she says something like, "Oh, it's a little tight." And then when we see Cooper in his vault suit, he says the same thing. Oh, this is
Right.
a little tight. And it's just, it's brilliant because um I just feel like Cooper hates her so much because he hates himself so much. And it's not so much
Right.
Lucy, it's he's hating himself because this is who he was. And so she is a physical reminder of all of the bad choices he had made, starting from agreeing to do this ad for Vault Tech.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
and
think he sees so much of his old idealism in her too.
oh yeah, like where he has that faith in everybody that everyone is a good person, like, oh, that, do I really have to kill him, like, do I really need
Right.
to do that? And that's very interesting because it even mirrors what the Vaulties are going through right now. And like we have this group of raiders that are now in prison, they're the ones who survived, and they're trying to figure out, what do we do with them? And the majority of the Vaulties are like, well, we can't just let them go because they know our security system, but we are also not going to kill them. And Norm is just like, we need to kill them. Like,
Right.
and
I'm Team
so,
Norm. I'm Team Norm. I'm
well,
not
and it's just a really fascinating thing because it's sort of like, what would push the Vaulties as a group to do that? And this is such, again, another setup of, well, the water supply. The chip
right.
is broken and it can only survive for the next 2 months. And that is not counting, the guests
The
or whatever,
prisoners.
the
Yeah.
prisoners. And so that is, and I love the morality lessons in this entire episode because the Vaulties are literally having that moral discussion of, um, I think I have a quote of where they say something like, how we treat our enemies is who we are as people, or who our character is, or something like that. And it's just like, that's exactly what Cooper was trying to say when he was filming that movie. Like, do I really need to kill him? I don't think I would do something like that. And it's like, how hard do you need to be pushed before you, again, to quote Wilsnick, become a different animal altogether? And I love that because it's like, we saw how hard Max was pushed, and we saw him literally almost smash Thaddeus's head in, whereas with Lucy, and we'll see this in the next episode, the ghoul could keep pushing and pushing and pushing her. And I do think, again, to go back to our first episode, like, she does need to have a little bit of an edge. She can't just trust completely, like, blind, right? But she's not losing her sense of self. And I
Right.
really love that. Um, and so out of everybody, remember, out of everybody who tells Norm, basically it's Steph. It's Steph. And
Yep.
knowing who Steph is now, I'm just
Right.
like, okay, is she doing this on purpose? Because it's like, did she genuinely care about her husband? I mean, granted, they had a baby together, but that was basically the whole point of the vault, essentially, is
Right.
reproduction.
And was it transactional for her, or did she care about her husband?
Right. And it's sort of like, I don't know. And again, this is brilliant writing because it's like, is she manipulating Chet in order to manipulate Chet? Or does she genuinely miss her husband and need someone to cry on? Or maybe it's both. I mean, she could be that
Right.
complex. Um, but I
Really enjoy
just,
Steph. And can we just like applaud how badass she looks with an eye patch?
oh my gosh, she pulls that off. I do not think I could pull it off the way that she pulls it off.
Right? I don't
Yeah.
think I could either, but it looks fucking amazing on her and like well done.
Well,
Well done.
and it's funny that you bring that up because, again, what you said, an eye for an eye, and she literally lost an eye. And so you have Betty, who is basically from the same place. Let's just hint at from
Right.
that Steph is. And yet we're already seeing two different kind of morality takes where Betty is very much, we're not going to kill them. Like that, like basically lecturing Norm, where Norm's like, oh, you're right, sorry. But then Steph's all like, I really miss my husband. Or I don't think she comes right out and say that he's right, but there is a very heavy implication that she supports what Norm said.
I think she actually did say that you're right. And if your
Okay.
dad was here, he would do the right thing.
Oh, right. That's what she says. Yeah. If your dad were here, he would do the right thing. Yeah. And And yeah, that's very, very telling because again, Hank and Steph come from the same vault where apparently they have the best mashed potatoes. But and I think that Steph
And
mu
Betty also does.
yeah,
Betty
Betty too. Betty
too,
too.
right? Yep.
Yeah. And I think that Steph had to have been, and again, we'll go into it when we find out, she has to be a recent transfer because she's still young. She's still really
Right.
young. Um, so yeah, so I think that that's really, really take a good, it's just very interesting. Um,
Well, the
I, it,
cryo chambers again affect things like that. But
oh,
yes,
that's, yeah.
recent transfer. But yeah.
Um, and so I think that it's also, so to go back to the scene with Cooper, and Lucy and the water scene, I think one of the things besides him trying to push her and break her because he's so angry at himself, she wants to keep him from looking at him like a human, like a person, like, because I feel like if he knows her, if he assumes that she is like him, he might assume that Lucy will look at him, look past the way that he looks and treat him like a human. And it's almost he's leaning into that beast or that animal or that uncaring bastard. Like he wants her to hate him too. The
Right. He
way that
wants
he,
her to believe that he's a monster.
yeah, because that's going to be easier for him because the second she starts treating him like an actual human, I think he's, I don't know if scared is the word that I would use, but he might be a little concerned that he starts to lean into that humanity the way that he already has, if we're being honest, like even in their first meet cute, letting her talk, like letting her lecture him instead of just shooting
Right.
her to shut her up, or even like using her as a live bait versus just
Right.
killing her and using her body as bait. Like he's already played into that morality because of it. And that is why I think that, so she, she's going through this tough time, and Vault Boy or whatever has always been that guiding compass for her, like don't give up, or whatever, like little great little saying that Vault Tech says to inspire people. And so when she sees that billboard of Vault Tech, it's almost like a reminder to her, like don't give up, because you can see kind of that flash of hope that like, okay, I'm gonna do this for my dad. And then Cooper just fucking shoots his face off. And she looks at him like offended, like,
I love that moment so hard though. Like that was beautiful in so many ways.
oh yeah, for sure. And again, that goes into Cooper. And it's like this whole episode, we find out that he is Vault Boy. And
Right.
he is the basis of Vault Boy. And this is brilliant because after we see him shoot, the guy goes right back into that flashback back of like, okay, my suit's tight, and he steps in. And can I just say that when him and Barb are walking in and he says something like, oh, I'll try not to embarrass you, and she doesn't say anything, like, oh, you could
Right.
never do that, like I'm just like,
I was offended on his behalf.
I was like, ah, like if my husband ever said that to me, like if we were all going out to like a bunch of writers, I would be like, honey, like you could never embarrass me. Like I have your back. Like that is,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. 1,000,000%. Like nothing like could ever do would ever embarrass me because I have his back 1,000,000,000%. Like that's my man. I picked him.
yeah.
Like
Well, and if
yeah,
anything, they should be worried that they're gonna embarrass themselves in front of you or in front of, like, I'm gonna have, like, I just I can't. And so what I didn't pick up in the scene, but then when I rewatched it, I did, is so when Cooper asks, like, oh, hey, does this really block from radiation? The two suits look at
look
Barb.
at each other and look at Barb.
They look at Barb for an answer, and Barb kind of nods, like, okay, you can say it. And then they say, oh, yeah, it does. And obviously, it goes way over Cooper's head because number one, he's not going to, think of like, why would he worry about his wife? But it's just crazy because, like, first of all, that's her husband who's literally doing her a favor by being part of this ad. So you would think that, of course,
Right.
they can speak freely, or of course, they're touting the suit as something that does block from radiation. Why do they need someone's permission to then say it?
Right.
And not only that, his own wife's permission. And so, like, it almost
It
makes me,
almost makes you question if
if
it's
they do.
actually true that
Yes,
it blocks radiation or not, or
yes,
if they're just taking your money and it doesn't.
well, and that's my thing too, because I'm like, why would they need to look at Barb? And that's hugely implies then that if it doesn't, she just okayed them lying to her own husband. Like, if you
Right?
think about that for a second. And it's crazy because you have him saying, you guys are doing God's work. Thank you guys for what you're doing. Like, oh my
Right,
gosh,
and he's
so
so
pure.
genuine and so
Yes.
sweet, and I'm just like, "That bitch.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
she
he's
deserved better."
well, and it's like so think if you think about it, like she's taking advantage of the fact that she's his wife. She's taking advantage of his own patriotism because not only is it, oh, his wife asked me to do this ad, but he genuinely thinks he's protecting American people by, selling them on Vault Tech because,
Right,
with bomb talks, he wants to protect, the people. And so it's like he
right. As
genuinely
an
believes.
ex-Marine, he cares
Yeah, he
and wants
genuinely
to
believes in
protect his
what he's
fellow
doing.
Americans.
Exactly. And I think, like, again, to go, like, when he sees Vault Boy on that billboard as the ghoul, he sees him with that thumbs up. And we see in this flashback that actually Cooper came up with the thumbs up. And so
Right?
it's like
The
that callback.
self-loathing, like,
Yeah.
ooh,
And it's like that callback to that birthday party at the beginning of that first episode where they're like, come on, Coop, do the thumbs up. And he's like, I don't think it's appropriate with, what's going on. And it's just, it is that self-loathing. And it makes me wonder, like, and maybe this is a crack theory. Maybe I just have my shipper glasses on. I don't know. But we know that Cooper and Barb were together when he went overseas. But Barb is a high position in Vault Tech. Did she go out of her way to target Cooper because of what he represents to the country? Like, is their whole relationship a setup in order to use him as sort of like this spokesperson for Vault Tech? Or is it based on truth and then it just turns bad? And I don't know which one would be worse, to be honest.
right? Right? Like, but like, how insidious would it be if the whole thing was a setup from the get-go? And like, she is calculating enough that I could see that being a thing.
Right. Right. Well, and it's like and the crazy part is, and again, we'll touch on this when the episode comes up, but for Cooper's dog, like I like the rationale behind why pets shouldn't be in the vaults genuinely makes sense. When she explained it to Cooper, I was like, okay, I could see that. I understand that. However, I also don't I do not think, like, I feel like Barb has such like she's literally at that circle meeting. So she is a high ranking official that she I think with the backing of let's pretend Cooper doesn't find out about all of this stuff. If her husband is Cooper Howard and she has her position, I am sure that they could have made an exception for Roosevelt if she really
Right?
wanted to.
Yeah,
And
if
so
she
she,
wanted to. I have that theory that like it was her idea to not have pets in the vault because she
right.
doesn't even like Roosevelt.
Yeah, I agree.
And like, I just like I can't get that theory out of my head.
No, and so far, like that's gonna be like a head headcanon until we find out otherwise. And the thing is,
Right?
it's like to go back to what's great about the show and this writing is that every character, again, besides Lucy, is very morally gray because
Right?
I do believe that Barb genuinely loves Cooper. She loves Janie. She wants them safe. Like, I think that she makes all of these sacrifices for her family. Like, but there are trickles where even
She
I
genuinely
question
believes she's doing the right thing.
for her family. And I'd be the same way. I'd be like, I don't give a shit about anyone else. Like, as long as my family is protected, that is what I'm working towards. I completely get that. But the thing that makes me kind of like, there's that selfish element in it as well, because even, and I think they talk about this, I think you mentioned it from the first episode, where Cooper's like, if I had my way, I'd retire from acting, or we would move to a ranch on Bakersfield, and that is all.
Right.
Like, and Betty, or not Betty, Barb is just like, well, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to work, I want to be a part of this. I don't just want to be like this, this stay-at-home mom. And I totally get that too, but at the same time, it's like, I thought that you cared about your family. So where is your line? You know what I mean? And so it's like, you want to keep your job and do what you want to do, even if maybe the best thing for your family is to get away from Hollywood, to get away from the city, to just kind of chill. Like, this is what your husband wants. And again, this is how I know that sort of like Barb kind of wears the pants in that relationship, is the whole, well, he's not pushing it on her. And I love that. I love that he respects what she wants to do. I love that he lets her kind of take the lead, but in a healthy marriage, there has to be some kind of compromise, and I don't
Right.
see any compromise on her parts. She won't even let them take the dog. So,
Right.
it's like,
There's no give and take. It's
right,
all Cooper giving and Barb taking.
right. And so that's why, that is where my dislike for her comes in, because I do not see her doing anything, like, even to go to the taffy. It's like,
Right.
she gives him the taffy that he doesn't like, and he takes it. And it's just kind of like, and I think this is again why he is so hard on Lucy, because I think that, and I don't know how Barb was when she and Cooper first met. I don't know if she was like, she had all of these ideas and she wanted to change the world and she wanted to be like this good person, but Cooper is not looking at Lucy like, oh, that's my daughter and I have to protect her. He's looking at her like, that's me and I hate it. But I also think a part of him, and I don't think it's like, oh, that's Barb, but it's like, I'm not going to fall for this again. And
Right.
he compares it to Barb. So in my opinion, he sees her as a viable romantic partner, or else he like, there is no reason for him to, keep her alive the way that he does. Um so yeah, so I think that it's very, very interesting, how everything was set up. Some of the follow-throughs that we saw in this episode, just like the dog, like the dog stuck with the body. Um, and then obviously Max and Thaddeus found the dog, and the dog led them straight to the head. And now it's just he followed the head, and the dog. I just think that it's brilliant, because the dog, all the dog cared about is Wilsig and just the head. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
It
so
was a genius episode, but like literally every episode has been absolutely brilliant and has fired on all cylinders.
oh yeah. And a lot of it is like that quirky like, we get the humor from the vault, the vault, the guys, and just, and that is going to pay off when we get into Vault 4. Like,
Hmm.
that threw me, and I was just like, that is so brilliant, and it would not have worked if they hadn't set it up. You know what I mean?
Right. And I love the running gag with the Lucy and the okie dokie. Like I fucking love that. It's
Oh yeah.
beautiful.
I think so too. Or just like when she like sticks the tracker up his nose, like snug as a bug. Like,
Right. That
I
was so
just think so cute.
like
Um,
she's absolutely precious. And Ella Purnell is fucking incredible
yeah.
as Lucy. Like she has done an amazing job.
Oh yeah.
Like Walton and Ella are absolutely incredible. But like this whole
The
cast
cast, yeah.
has just brought their A game.
Oh yeah.
And it's incredible.
Okay, so let's put our shipper goggles, the goggles on. So in this episode specifically, if we have people who are writing either a slow burn romance or a romance similar to this, what stuck out at you? Like, what evidence did you find in this specific episode of why you started shipping it? And obviously, we have the chemistry between the actors, so we'll curb that. But in terms of
Right.
either actions or anything like that, what did you see specifically?
Okay, first of all, the sweetie and sweetheart all the
Oh my
time, even
gosh,
though he's doing it sarcastically,
the terms
but
of endearment. Oh my gosh, I
like
love it. Well,
I love
and
it. I think it's fantastic. And like even though he's doing it sarcastically and ironically, I fucking love it. And like he should never stop calling her those things.
what's interesting is because I'm like, as I'm sure you know, a Jack Sparrow girly. And so like I was introduced to this when Jack Sparrow called everyone love. And obviously you call someone, a term of endearment. Obviously if you're in a relationship, it's me and my husband joke, like the second he says my real name, I'm like, what did I do to piss you off? Like, my name is
Right?
not
Like
Heather to you. Like, I am
right, like
honey or babe or whatever.
exactly. Like if Blake ever says Chelsea, I know I'm like, am I in trouble? What did
Yeah,
I do?
like what did I
Am I
do?
going to the principal's office? Like
Uh,
what
so
happened?
So it's like, so Jack Sparrow, he called everybody. So it was like a blanket. Everybody loved because he didn't remember their names and yet he didn't want to be an asshole, so he would just call everyone love, right? And so
Right.
what's interesting to me for the Ghoul and Lucy is he doesn't stick with one. He calls her Valty, he calls her sugar, he calls her sweetie, he calls her sweetheart, he calls her darling, he calls her all of these things. And I'm
Right.
like, okay, number one, he doesn't want to get a name because it's almost like naming a dog. The second you name the dog,
It's
you
yours
have
forever.
it's yours forever. And you have now attached a piece of humanity and he does not want to do that. But he could call her anything in the world. And
Right.
instead, he calls her these names like that what you would normally call like
Your significant
your
other.
significant other. Mhm.
And they just keep coming out of his mouth like he can't help himself.
Mhm.
And I love it with my whole entire being.
I do
Like,
too.
even though he's being snarky and sarcastic with it, which I fucking love, by the
Yeah.
way,
Oh yeah.
like, I just love it. I think it's fantastic.
So what else? Tell me what else.
Hmm. Like you said, the like him keeping her alive because there's like 87 times by episode 3 that he could have shot the shit out of her and removed a giant headache from his fucking life
Yeah.
at this point, and he has chosen not to repeatedly.
Right.
And like he just keeps like low key looking out for her, even though he doesn't have to. And we'll get to this in later episodes, also specifically with the organ market.
Yep.
And like, why would you do that if you don't care?
Well, and to go off of that too, I mean, you have him talking to her like a human, whether he wants to or not. I think that the Ghoul is the type of person, and we kind of saw that in his like introduction in Philly, right? Where he's just keeping his mouth shut, watching things. He doesn't really talk unless he has to. And we kind of see that play out over the course of the season. And I feel like the fact that he is talking to her about like studies about waterboarding or torture or all of these things, that
Right?
shows that he recognizes that intelligence, that she can keep up with him mentally. And I think that he almost, as much as he hates her, sees her as an equal to even have a conversation with her about stuff like this in the first place.
Right? And it's like he cannot help himself.
No, he can't. Yeah.
It's and like I love that energy. Like she drives him fucking insane, but he cannot stop engaging with her, and I love that.
Well, my crack theory for season 2, and again, we'll do a whole episode on our theories for season 2, is just after everything that happens in episode 8, she's gonna be so quiet and he is going to like miss her constant talking.
Yapping.
And then he's going to push her, something's gonna happen, she's gonna start talking, and then he's just like, "Would you shut the fuck up?" But the talking he secretly like enjoys, I think.
Yes.
So, um, so yeah, so I think in terms of like the 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 shipping, I think that that is where that comes from. And so when you are writing your characters, you can do the same thing. Like it's almost a guarantee, but like now let's look at the entire series. I don't remember him ever saying anything, a term of endearment to Barb. I don't remember him saying any terms of endearment to anyone that he comes across. So unlike Jack Sparrow, who kind of uses that term of endearment fleetingly, like it doesn't mean anything, he just assigns it to everyone. He is only assigning it to Lucy. And so as a shipper, that makes her special. Whether in a good way or not, it doesn't matter because um he has made her a focal point in his life, whether he likes it or not. And so
Yes.
I really like that. Um, and so obviously, like he winds up, it's weird. Like they almost kind of save each other from the Gulper in a weird way. Like they kind of work as a team already. And yeah, and I really like that. Like again, she's not screaming and he's not like it's like I almost feel like he looks at her after the whole situation and realizes that maybe she's a little tougher than she looks because she's not screaming, she's not like, "Oh, no," or crying or anything like that. Like she almost got eaten by something she never even knew existed. Like these are fingers coming after her. And I feel like he's caught up in the moment because he's pissed off about the chem, but she's tougher than she looks. And even to go back to the water situation, she's not complaining about anything as of right now. It's only when she sees the water that she asks for it. And so,
Right? And she doesn't whine
no,
even when he dumps the water out. Like she's not a whiny little bitch about it.
right,
Like she just kind of sucks it up
right.
and keeps on trucking, which is like kudos.
Yeah. Well, and I think to go, if we're applying this to our writing, sometimes, we want to write the smart, sassy, female. I think personally, like my brand is more, I like the innocent girls a little bit more. But if you are gonna write the sassy, smart ass, you have to know also when to pick your battles because I feel like someone who is gonna be a smart ass about every little thing, that is not going to endear me to your heroine. And it won't even do it for me if your hero is gonna be a smart ass about every little thing, Cooper's not even a smart ass about every little thing. And so it's
You
like
have
you
to pick
have
your moment.
exactly, or else she's gonna be Kylo Ren. Like she's just gonna be complaining about everything, or oh, you have a witty zinger for every little like, how can I take you seriously if that's all I see? And so
Have
if
to balance it with vulnerability, I think.
Oh, at 100%. And so this is why I love exactly what you said about her, Chelsea, about how like when he dumps the water, she sucks it up. Like she doesn't complain. Like I love that they had their moment after he lost his shit. Like she doesn't even react until after he lost his shit and with the chem, and it's like, "Oh, motherfucker." And like
Oh,
God,
I'm sorry. I should have just let it eat me. Like I love that she
exactly.
claps back.
Yes, and she
Also,
should have clapped back in that moment. That was the perfect moment to clap back. When he's using her as live bait and she's like, "Why are you doing this to me?" Like that is the perfect moment to do it. But if she is doing it for every little thing, then it becomes annoying and then we don't actually see, you know, again, it's like Cooper wants her to react. And so she actually has more power by not reacting, by staying
right?
quiet in certain things. And that is what I love because it's much more balanced right now than even though he has the whole rope around her neck and is dragging her through this wasteland. It's like they're still relatively on equal footing right now because she has not broken. She is still the same girl for the most part who left the vault, who believes in the golden rule, who looks at Vault Boy like, oh, a symbol of hope. And it doesn't matter what Cooper Howard does to her, like she is going to hold that. And so if you're writing your heroine, just like you said, have moments of vulnerability. Like I don't see her when she's saying, "Why are you doing this to me?" Like, that is not her clapping back. That is genuinely a moment of vulnerability because she doesn't understand, because of this golden rule that she has grown up with, why someone would choose to hurt her when she has done nothing to deserve it. And
Right.
so when she does clap back after he loses his shit on the chem, instead of being like, "Oh, that was really smart of her to use what she had as a weapon to not break down," like, it's like she's like, "Oh, I should have just the thing eat me." And, like, it's funny because his response to that, like, do you remember how he responds to her saying something like that?
It was like 4 AM this
Yeah,
morning.
I can't even remember, but it was like, I don't even know if he does respond to it or if he's just so focused on the chems, but it's like that was the perfect moment for her to kind of lose a little bit of her own control and be like, you can't push me around. Like, you just used me as live bait. And now it's like I save us because Cooper's fucking flat on his ass right there, and you're mad because of this. And the great thing is she doesn't even know why he's so mad because she
Right,
doesn't
like, she
understand
doesn't know
this
what
world
they're
yet.
for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so this will obviously come into play in that next episode, but I just found it really, really fascinating. Like, and again, as that shipper, it's so funny because Cooper has been trying to poke and poke and poke, but Lucy kind of had the upper hand because he lost control. Like, and for good reason. Like, he doesn't want to turn feral, right? But
Mhm.
it's like, you know, she kind of won that round, to be honest. Like, she's alive
She did.
and he lost his shit. Like, out of all the poking, like, and she only poked him one time. So,
Right? Like, out of all the button pushing he's done to her this whole time, he's the one that ended up losing control and, like, losing his shit, and, like, all she did was clap back one time.
yep. And I just think that, and I love the whole, like, as a shipper, that grumpy sunshine dynamic. Like, you can already see like they're gonna be really, really good for each other. And like you said, it's that whole Persephone Hades vibe that I'm such a sucker for. Um,
Right.
and so, and even like to go to the water, like him being that smart ass about it, and just the look on Walton's face when he drops the water is just so perfect. Like,
It was.
is so
Like, you
perfect.
can see the "fuck you" on
Oh,
his face
yeah.
as
And
he's
this
throwing the
how
water
she
at Walt.
narrows her eyes, like, yeah, I just, and you tell me I'm not supposed to ship this? Like, are you fucking insane? Like,
Right,
I
right.
just
Like,
I
how
just
could
can't.
we ship anybody else but these 2?
Right. And so I'm just like, okay. And again, it's like, and I just I just love it. I just love it as a shipper. Like, if you're developing your romance between this two, and whether it's a subplot, like a major subplot, or even just romance in general, these are little ways, especially as an enemies to lovers or a grumpy sunshine, that you can do where it's like the power dynamics actually they're relatively equal and stuff like that. And that's what I love to explore in my own writing, is like, especially if you have a virgin as a heroine, and a much an older guy, like if you're doing age gap, everyone thinks, oh, the power is with the man, but in actuality I think that it's much more balanced because usually in that scenario he falls first, and so she does have more
Right.
power over him. And it is that attraction to, I think that every person, not just every man, wants a partner who looks at them like they are the best thing that has ever happened to them, or that they are special. And I think that this is why, Cooper is such an asshole, because I could see Lucy looking at Cooper like, or even like he doesn't want her pity, you know what I mean? And so I
Right.
think that he wants to be this monster because he would rather have her hate him than
But
to
have her
even.
pity.
Yeah, exactly. And so so these are things that you can definitely put into your own writing. Do you have any tips for that, Chelsea, based on this episode specifically?
I really struggle to verbalize these kind
I
of
know,
things
right?
because I'm like, I'm so cerebral, but also very intuitive with my writing and with my characters. And it's really hard to verbalize these things and like these energies that I feel from my characters and how I put that on the page. But like with just watching the physical dynamics
Hmm.
between uh Cooper and Lucy, I love how he is supposed to be dominating her in these scenes, especially like when he has the rope around her neck, etc. But you don't ever see her cowering
No.
from
Mm-mm.
in any of these scenes. And that's a small thing that you can do in your writing. If you're writing a dynamic like that, where like, I mean, your heroine doesn't have to be spitting venom or
Mm.
whatever. Like, she doesn't have to be biting and clawing and like whatever, but like just not cowering and like
Looking him in the eye.
looking him in the eye, like the
Yeah.
direct eye contact and just like refusing to let his energy bulldoze hers
Yeah.
is a really kind of quiet strength that you can give your heroine.
And I want to see more of that because, like we discussed, when it comes to men and how like people assume anger is masculine, but really it's control. I honestly feel that when you have a female who is supposed to be a badass, we think, oh, her being a smartass, her fighting, her yelling back or standing up for herself verbally or just whatever, her picking every single battle, oh, that's a badass. And it's not. It's exactly like what you said. It's it's a quiet strength of, okay, I might not be yelling at you, but I will look you in the face. I'm not going to flinch if you do anything. I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to struggle. I'm just going to sort of um have faith in myself and figure I will figure everything out. It's like
I'm
you
not going to
don't
back down.
right, I'm not going to back down, but I don't need to squawk about it either. Like it's like something I always tell like my stepson is like oh, it's like that quote from the Game of Thrones, right? I think Tyrion says a lion never has to prove that he's a lion. He's just a lion. And so if you're like constantly chirping like, "Oh, I'm so tough," or blah blah blah, what do you have to prove? Like just let your actions handle it. And so when you see Lucy just again, like ever since he comes back, he has that gun cocked to her head. She has every reason to run or to be scared of him. And that's not just his physical looks, but like what he represents. She doesn't. She holds her own. She treats him like an equal. And I think that that scares him because he's so used to everyone, being prejudiced against him. Like the whole brotherhood wants to kill ghouls just to kill ghouls. And even where he takes Lucy in this next episode, they're literally like keeping these ghouls in these cages and stuff just because they're ghouls. And it's like I think that that really scares him because she is treating him like an equal, like a human, and he doesn't want that. He would rather be treated like a monster because then it justifies his anger and his resentment and his bitterness. And yeah, I just love that. And so just keep those points in mind when you guys are writing. Um, really quickly in terms of writing antagonists, especially love interests, it's so it's so easy to make them cliche and hated and everything, and you can definitely do that. We've all done that and it works well, but really take into consideration Max, right? Like Max is a person who is so morally gray that it's like you like it's he's just a very fascinating character. And so and you can even see this in Fourth Wing a little bit. Gosh, I can't even have you read Fourth Wing or no?
I haven't yet. It's on my TBR though.
So I won't spoil anything, but one of the things like I love about the main character, oh my gosh, I think his name's Xavier. I can't even remember. But like he is very like has faith in Violet. Like he doesn't need to protect her. Like he knows that she can handle herself. Whereas the love interest wants to protect her, wants to get her away from this because he doesn't think that she can handle it. And I feel like that's very much Max. Max does not think Lucy is capable of cutting off a head. Max probably doesn't even think Lucy can go wherever she is delivering this head. And so it's like little condescending moments like that while still making him be a decent guy. That would be a very complex love interest where like the readers are probably still going to hate him because he's not the main, the love, the hero, but still like it's a lot easier to make, or it's a lot, it'll enrich the story a little bit more to make him um a character like that than it is just to make him an asshole that everybody sort of hates. So,
Right.
any
You
final
have
thoughts,
options.
Chelsea? Yeah, you have
Um,
options.
and like with heroines, like I do enjoy a Spitfire every now and then,
Yeah.
a girl that will fight. Like I love Beth Dutton and I will love her till the day I die.
Oh
I
yeah.
love to watch her beat ass and drag somebody,
Oh yeah.
but you don't need that 24/7. I love Beth's quiet moments,
Oh yeah.
her calm moments, the moments where it's just her and Rip vibing with each other and understanding each other, and they're like their quiet moments together. Oh my god, I love them so much. It's not even funny. Like it makes me sick how much I love those two characters.
Well, and I think the reason that we or we like Beth, because Beth is not a female character that we see nowadays that's easily likable, right? Like I
Right?
feel like
Beth
she,
is difficult.
right. But I think that because the writers did such a good job establishing her backstory, establishing that wound between her and her mother and even her older brother, I feel like we can understand it. And on top of that, like it's very similar to her own father, where it's like her loyalty is to her dad. It's not to the ranch, it's not to anyone. I would say she puts her dad above her own family as well,
Okay.
where like she would sacrifice, obviously she would sacrifice Jamie, but she would sacrifice Casey for her dad. Like I think that her dad is number one, I mean besides Rip obviously, and
Right.
I think she would do anything for her dad. And again, there is that one redeeming quality where like she hates this ranch. She does not have good memories of this ranch, but she is willing to fight her ass off for it because it means so much to her dad. And that is something that we can all empathize with. So, regardless of all of those flaws that she has and the fact that she is constantly, constantly fighting, that is something that we respect. And on top of that, Beth typically doesn't attack unless she's attacked first. And
Right. Like she waits until she is provoked.
yeah, so like she has, I always tell this to my husband because I am not a fighter at all, like physically, but it's sort of like, okay, you want to play this game. If you want to get into a verbal like word match with me, you're not gonna like it. Like that is like one superpower that I have, and I think that Beth is so witty and so smart, and she's like 5 steps ahead from anyone she's ever verbally sparred with. And that's why I think Rip is so perfect with her, because he knows not to even get into a sparring match with her. He knows exactly
Right.
how to handle her. And again, it's like if you want to write a character like Beth, you have to give her quiet moments, or else she isn't going to be liked at all, because it just can be so exhausting to fight all the time.
Right. Well,
So,
and you have to give her those redeeming qualities and
yes,
also vulnerability.
right.
Because I think something that a lot of people overlook about Beth is that deep seated vulnerability
Yeah,
and how terrified she is that when Rip finds out about the abortion, that he will abandon her,
yeah,
even though she loves him with like every single ounce of her soul.
yeah,
And that vulnerability makes her so incredibly human and so understandable. And I just like, I don't see how anybody could not love Beth because I absolutely adore her.
yeah. So I think that yeah, if you're looking to write again, this is a great episode to look at in terms of writing your antagonist or your like love interest. And when I say love interest, I'm more talking about like the guy she's not gonna get with. And even just that setup of that enemies to lovers, that grumpy sunshine, and just little nuances really, really make everything pop versus tell, 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 tell. And I think that um the way that Fallout is doing this, it's so good. I loved everything about I loved the vault scenes. Like I wasn't really I mean there were times when we were with, Max, I was just like, can we please get back to Cooper? But it's fine. Um and so I just think that yeah, I thought that this episode was really, really, really good.
Okay.
And I'm looking
And
forward to
I
episode
think that
4.
we do need Maximus as a foil for
Oh
Cooper.
yeah, I completely agree 100%. Because in a way, when he's rescued from that fridge, he's very much a Lucy in that moment of like stepping into this new world that he hasn't been expecting, and he was raised by the Brotherhood to like, so a lot of the stuff is programming that he needs to either fight against or really lean into. And I do get the sense that Lucy could be that huge catalyst for him, because all Max wants to do is go somewhere safe. Like he wants to just not have to worry about when his next meal is, or like he can just go to a vault and be safe.
Right. And
And
so valid.
yeah, it is valid.
So
And we understand it based on everything that he's been through. But Lucy, there is no way. Like she'll save Shet, she'll save Norm, she'll save her people, but there is no way she's go to in my she's there's no way she can go back into a vault when she has this freedom of, the wasteland. And I think that when Max realizes that okay, like it could be Lucy's like, oh, we can still have our happily ever after, but I'm not going in a vault. I think that something like that is going to really, he's gonna have that black moment or that like choice of like light or dark side, right? Like good
yeah,
or evil. And I honestly think that something that Lucy does is going to cause him to really lean into his villain era,
I agree.
yeah. So, and I
And I
think
am living for Lucy as Persephone and like becoming a queen of the underworld, like a queen of the wasteland, as it
well,
were.
she
And
is is it the radiation queen, right? She is the
I,
radiation.
yes,
Yeah.
radiation queen and
No,
no,
it's atomic
atomic
queen,
queen and radiation
radiation
king.
king. Yes.
And I am living for the Hades and Persephone vibes there.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that I'm just I love rewatching it, but it makes me want season 2 so bad just to be like,
Right.
tell me
And like,
everything.
oh gosh. And we have to wait and it's gonna kill me.
So, all right, well, that was episode 3. Chelsea, what are we asking them for their comments?
Okay, in the comments, do you believe that Maximus could be a villain or not?
Yes, what is your reasoning for, or what is your reasoning against? I want to see that too. And then we will be back next week with episode 4. Looking forward to it. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye.
Bye.